real estate, if it works out perfectly, you will have all the things people talk about. The reality is it very rarely works out perfectly, and it never works out perfectly forever.
Phil, I'm just going to start this by saying getting into real estate seems like one of the worst things people can do with a profession. I don't know the stats, but I feel like most people fail getting into that world, that industry. Am I wrong? I've done very little digging. I'm just talking to you. Whatever you say, I'm going to take as truth until after this episode when I'm curious.
Yeah, then I'm going to tap myself as the expert here.
Yeah.
So here's what I would tell you. Probably most people do end up getting out of real estate.
Okay.
Now, in my opinion, it's not always because they failed per se. I would say a lot of times what we are pitched in the world of social media and people that have been in real estate doesn't actually end up lining up with our reality. And so, you hear so frequently, oh, well, this can help you retire quickly and things like that. And then you go buy a property and it's a single family and you're making $300 a month and you go, how am I ever going to retire on $300 per month?
Yeah. So why do so many people get into real estate, do you think? Because I see a lot of people switching professions and the next thing is, I'm going for my real estate license now.
So I think the big attractiveness to real estate is that idea of like passive income, right? Like, hey, I'm not having to actively go to 8 to 5 job, and so I can just be making money, but I'm not having to do anything. I'll also tell you that's not reality. You can get to that spot where you're not having to do anything, but usually in the early days to make like the profit margins work, you have to be the one putting in the effort, right? Hey, I'm going to the house and I'm, trying to fix a leaky faucet. Because if I don't, I pay, Joe the plumber to come over.
Yep.
And Joe charges me $250. And it's like, well, there went my entire month's profit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not a great business model to just run, even. So I would say that's probably the attractiveness piece is like getting into that, hey, I may not have to work my current day job. And I would say you can get to that spot. It just takes either a vast amount of properties or it takes you getting to a spot where you can have properties paid off. And, if you're doing a 30-year mortgage, well, that could take 30 years to get that thing paid off. So you're going to have a day job for a while. And I think sometimes what people are hearing versus what they're envisioning don't line up.
And I've known a number of people, when I say that, I'm talking like two, who have told me like, oh, I'm going to go flip these homes. And after having done it for a few years, they come back and say, I made no money.
Yep.
In fact, I maybe took a little bit of a loss. And so, but there's this very romanticized idea of I'm going to take this beat up, rundown home, flip it, make it beautiful, and everyone's going to want to buy it. Maybe, but it sounds really expensive and really time consuming. And you're probably better off just investing in the market where you're not going to have to put that opportunity cost of your time into it. So tell me, is there anything around that where maybe people, or maybe there's a mistake I'm making with thinking that?
No, I mean, I think what I would say on both sides of it is with real estate, if it works out perfectly, you will have all the things people talk about. The reality is it very rarely works out perfectly and it never works out perfectly forever.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you think of the fix and flips, the reality is you might get one or two where you make $20,000 or $30,000 on it, which is really good. However, inevitably, if you do it for long enough, you're going to come to a house where one of two things happens. One, you start a project and then you realize, oh no, like there's a much bigger problem. There was mold in there. And now I'm paying for this $12,000, mold removal that wasn't in my numbers. So that can just completely derail a project as one, you get into some project and now it just becomes exponentially larger. The second one is, what if it just doesn't sell because the market has changed, So you think back, we're recording in 2026. Well, the world of real estate in 2021 and 2022 was just different than it is today. And so if I bought it with the anticipation that, hey, I bought this thing for 200, I'm going to put 50 into it, and then I'm going to increase the value by 100. And today, it's just not that case. Maybe prices have come down a bit. Now I'm sitting here saying, well, can I at least recover what I've put into it to make my ends meet?
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a specific situation that's got me it's dissuaded me from having any interest in buying homes, flipping them, selling them. I did sell one home at one point in time, and we're seeing this with a lot of my friends where they buy a starter home, they get married, and they're there for 5-10 years. They make it really nice. And the interest in, because so many people have listened to podcasts, they say, well, now I'm going to rent this out to other people that are looking to get their life started and whatever. And what's always dissuaded me was I knew of one family who they did that. And I don't know, they had renters for about 5-6 years. The renters plugged the sinks and intentionally flooded the home and threatened lawsuits on the owner, saying that there was a bunch of stuff that was mishandled with plumbing and whatever. It didn't actually end up going to court because they found that these people did, by it with their own intent, destroy the home. But the homeowners spent a ton of time, and they lived in a different state, about 13 hours away driving, where they had to go and they themselves decide, well, we have to fix this because we didn't have the funds to, or they didn't have the funds to do it all themselves. And I saw that case, and once it was done, they sold that property and said, we're never going through this again because there's no asset class of anything, any ETF or anything else that we could look at that's going to do what this did to us. So they've never been back in the real estate game since then. It's probably an outlier. Probably doesn't happen very often, but it got me to say, all right, that's never going to be, real estate's not going to be part of my portfolio, period.
Well, so to that point, and once again, anyone that's been in real estate for a long period of time, like, you can screen people as well as you want. You can do all of the different things to try and vet and make sure you've got the best tenant possible. The reality is life happens. You know, I've had people that have rented for me for 3 years and I keep renewing with them, similar to like this person, right? Like, you probably didn't extend the lease for another year if year one didn't go well. However, life happens to people and things change, and all of a sudden, maybe it was COVID and I lost a job and, you know, I didn't have the income I was thinking I was going to have, whatever it is. And then it gets into a tough spot where they don't manage the property well, they're not taking care of it, or they're intentionally doing something. And the problem with that is, it takes so long to recoup the funds that you're going to spend to build that back up. So to your point, to your friend's point, I 100% can understand somebody not wanting to get into it. And I tell people frequently when I get asked, hey, should I be in real estate? I go, if you want to handle those problems, right? Because like, it will inevitably happen. You will get that tough tenant. And unfortunately, I don't know all of the different states' laws, but especially in the state of Nebraska, the laws are created to protect tenants, not necessarily to protect landlords. And that can make it, really difficult, with, hey, people can be late on rent and I still have a mortgage payment, which is mandatory to be paid, but your tenant, well, they get an extra, leeway and things of that nature. So you can find yourself in some dicey spots, depending on, the tenant, landowner relationship.
Now, you've found success in this industry. So my question is, how did you get started and what keeps you here?
Good question. So to get started, I wish I had this, I was like a disciple of Bigger Pockets podcast, where I listened to this episode or this book. But long story short, I was meeting with a potential client in the financial advising world, and we were sitting there talking, and they just made the comment, hey, we're working on building a house right now. And we don't want to really move because we have 2 young kids. And so to get a 2-bedroom apartment for, 6 months is just a pain, but we don't want to run the risk of having 2 mortgages. Well, I thought their house was a nice looking home. And I was like, oh, well, this would be a kind of a cool house. So I said, well, if you would be willing to, get rid of your realtor so I don't have to pay the realtor fees and drop the cost of the house a little bit, I'd buy your house from you and then you could just rent it from me and then you wouldn't have to move. And they kind of chuckled and said, that'd be amazing. Well, anyway, the next day, the husband calls me. He's like, so my wife and I were talking over coffee this morning and like, did we actually sell you our house yesterday? I was like, well, yeah, as long as you're willing to do those 2 things, like let's get the deal done. And so that was the first house that I purchased, just a single family 4-bedroom home. And bought that and rented it to them. And then once they moved into the new house they had built, then I brought in new tenants. And that was about 13 years ago. And
wow.
So 13 years later, yeah, still own it, still cash flowing with it. So that's what got me into it. What kept me in it, what I noticed frequently was that dynamic that I just explained happens a lot. And I was blessed to have a pretty good social network where frequently people were saying, hey, we're moving, but the timing just isn't working, right? Hey, I'm moving to California and I need to be there, this date, but I don't want to wait to sell my house where then I'm going to be paying rent or paying my new mortgage in California and also paying my mortgage in Nebraska. And so I would say, well, I'll just buy it from you and then you can rent it back until you move.
Yeah.
And the beauty for me was, well, one, I usually knew the person I was buying from. So there's a level of like trust and integrity there I'm not buying a lemon. Every house has problems, right? I mean, that's just going to happen. But you at least either knew the problems or you knew the person and you felt comfortable that they would have told you the problems.
Right.
And then I think the second part that was really good and, helpful is immediately I had a tenant. It wasn't, hey, I bought this and then it sits there for 3 or 4 months and I'm paying the mortgage out of my pocket. It was, well, we've already agreed upon, the rent price and I'm just now having you day one in my house, right, and renting it out.
Now, do you know roughly how many properties you own, manage now?
Yeah, so there are 16 physical properties. Some are, multifamily, fourplex, duplex. There's more units, but actually 16 dwellings.
So if someone were listening to this today, and there's a lot of CEOs that we meet where they want to start a podcast, and we show all the numbers, dissuading people, saying, here's all the reasons people fail, and less than 8% of you are going to do past 10 episodes. Less than 1% are going to go past a season. Yep. And you talk to that CEO, they're like, I am that 1%.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So, tell me I can't and I will.
Exactly. So if you have someone like that listening today and they are very interested in doing real estate and say, well, I see that most people fail, but they're not me. Mm-hmm. What would be one thing you would ask that anyone consider before really pivoting and jumping into that industry?
I'm going to give you 2 things. I'm going to cheat. 2 things. So number 1 is, do you love real estate or do you love the idea of real estate? If you love the idea of real estate, there may be additional ways to access real estate without being the landlord yourself. You could find a young person that says, hey, I'm willing to do all the nights and weekend phone calls. I'm willing to go do the property management. I just don't have the capital, or I don't have as much capital. And so you can find a partnership, right? I mean, if they're a CEO of a company, they know all about delegation. That might be a better route to go. The second is sometimes there's just really intentionally making sure that you're understanding the numbers of the ROI. I find real estate's one of the hardest ways to actually measure return. Some things it's like, well, I put in $1,000 today. At the end of the year, it was worth $1,100. I know my exact rate of return. Real estate, sometimes they'll say cash on cash. Sometimes they'll say cash on equity. And there's so many different ways to like make it seem like it's working. And sometimes it actually is. And other times you're like, this isn't actually working on the number side. So I think just really digging into the numbers, because I've never been presented with a real estate deal that doesn't work on paper. And yet there's a lot of real estate deals that don't work in reality.
Yeah. So my next question then is around marketing, because one of the barriers to entry for me that I see of becoming a successful realtor is there is a lot of signage out there for, let's say we're in Nebraska. If I'm a former Husker, I'm going to have a much easier time than someone who wasn't.
100%.
Right? Out the gate, because you're talking about a network of people out the gate. Well, there's a whole bunch of people they don't know that know them. They'll want to work with them just so they can have that interaction. So if I'm getting started and I don't have a lot of capital, but I have a lot of desire and I think I can put all the sweat equity into it, how do I compete with something like that where they have so much marketing infrastructure with just their name alone before I've even gotten started and tried to compete with them?
So it's a great question. It's a real barrier to entry, right? I mean, at the end of the day, name recognition is a big deal in any service, right? I mean, if Pod Pony's up against, Joe Blow's podcast, well, Pod Pony's going to win, right? That's no offense to that guy. It just doesn't have as much brand recognition. I think in the world of, getting your name out there, this transcends real estate. It's almost in anything you're starting. I think oftentimes people are nervous or scared to like go and approach friends and family and people they're really close with. And the way that I kind of, explain this, or the way I've always thought about it, is every restaurant that opens up, they have a pre-opening, right? And they invite their friends and their family and their closest people because they just want to show them what they're doing. And they also want to get a trial run with people that will give them honest feedback.
Right.
And so I've never been to one of those and been like, I can't believe they asked me to come to their brand new restaurant. Like, that was dumb. It's like, no, I'm honored every single time. It's like, man, that was amazing. Now, the reality is, though, what my friend who invited me to their restaurant, they didn't say, hey, Phil, if you come, you can never eat at a different restaurant again, right? Like, that was never the conversation. The conversation was, I just want you to come check out my restaurant. Yeah. So similarly, I think, if you're getting started in, a world of sales or a new business, it's like, you just need to make sure people know you're in the business of it, because if they don't know, they're certainly not going to come to you and ask you about it. And you and I have probably both been in that spot where you're talking to someone, they go, yeah, I just started a podcast and I'm doing it with this. And you're like, but I do that. And they're like, no way, I didn't even know it. It's probably just because they didn't know, right? And you're like, dang it, I wish they would have known. I could have helped them with that. And so I think, somebody that's trying to overcome that maybe lack of name recognition, instead of focusing on the lack of name recognition, start with, who do I know? And it's amazing how quickly, the network can grow and expand.
Oh, totally. Referrals, look, no matter how good of marketing Pod Pony or anyone can do, word of mouth, it's still like king of the hill, which is great. I love that we're referring to what our friends are saying before AI, which is happening less and less. But anyway, that's its own podcast, no problem.
Episode 2 will be with that.
I know, but you do have a podcast. You
Yes,
have
sir.
a lot of episodes, and you fall into the minority again with people that have gone past 10 episodes. How many are you at now? What's the show about? Where can people listen to it? What is this podcast?
Yeah, so it's called Who Knew in the Moment. And so the premise is, as you're living your life, rarely do you realize the magnitude of a moment. But in hindsight, you look back and you're like, well, thank God that happened, because it ended up leading to this. And so for me, I think we're at episode like 386, which, that's a lot of time and energy and effort, as you're well aware. But, the amazing thing for me is everyone has a great story. Mm-hmm. You just have to take the time to reflect on it. I think so frequently we just fast forward and we assume, oh, well, you've always had a great business. And you're like, well, let me tell you about the first 4 months of my business. It's like, no, I haven't always had this great successful business. Or maybe it started off really fast, but then I hit this lull in my business. And then, because I met this person or I was willing to make this pivot, then I saw increase in expansion in the business. And so that's really what I focus on, is just highlighting people's stories, where they're at, and how they got there.
Amazing. And people can find this Apple?
Yeah, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, I would say, are probably the 3 most common. You can do the, iHeartRadios and whatnot, but Amazon podcast, but I don't know how many people actually listen to this.
I don't even know. I know it's all, and Google Podcasts is now YouTube. Everything's changing.
Yep.
So for people who are listening to this today and they want to follow you, where do they go if they want to learn more? They're thinking about selling their own home and whatever.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be uncommon from most people probably. I'm going to give you my cell phone number, 402-641-6207. Shoot me a text. Give me a call. I'm always open to chatting with people. And then if you look up on like Facebook, Phil Friedrich, or Instagram is Fill the Cup.
So you're not off the hook completely. There is one more question we have. And now that you've said no one's given their phone number yet. So there is a song I hope you say for this, but we'll see what you say. Because we're a media company, we like to ask, when your life, let's say it's all said and done, let's say your life's made up into a CD, a soundtrack, or cassette, and there was a song for every area of your life, and if you got to pick the song that best exuded your career, what would you go with?
Best exudes the career.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go, I would say it's a Christian song, but it's called Black Sheep. And, you're a little bit different if you're the black sheep of, a dynamic, but inevitably the difference is oftentimes what makes you unique and have success.
That's a lot better than what I was hoping you'd say, because you're the only person that's given your phone number on this. I thought for a second it might be Carly Rae Jepsen's Call Me Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, if people are interested, you shouldn't maybe give Phil a call. You should totally give him a call.
Give a call.
Anything else you want to tell this audience today? Anything we should know? Obviously, we got to have you back as developments in real estate happen. I have more questions. Don't have more time on the show. But anything else you want to be sure we know about today?
I'm going to be down for episode 2. I appreciate you. Great interaction. You guys have a great spot. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And for the listener who pulled up a chair to hear us have a conversation, thank you for checking out this episode of the Biztape. You're going to want to hit subscribe because, look, I don't know who's coming up next, but I do know it's going to be awesome. It's going to be insightful. And I also know you're not going to want to miss it. So hit subscribe and we'll see you then.